All right. So native program, native plants, what they are, what they aren't, and what you don't need to grow them. Disclaimers. I won't describe species or tell you what to plant. We chatted about that a little bit about the program. There are too many factors to consider, and I'm just one person with biases and my own limited knowledge. We do have other programs available on YouTube already. We'll have other programs in the future, and we can take some of those questions after the program, where we can all talk about some of the problems that we have and how we can, address them. That's enough. I won't be able to answer all your questions. And everything that I'm about to say is on a spectrum. So kind of keep that in mind, that life is like not all or nothing. It's not black or white. It's very situational, depends on your environment, what you're trying to accomplish, that kind of thing. So you can, for example, you can research something to death. You can take 5 years, learn everything that you can about your situation before you do something, or you can just dive in and try. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We'll do something a little bit different and we'll try it again. Some assumptions on my part: you already know the benefits of the native plants, that they're good for air quality, water quality, soil pollinators, bees, butterflies, birds. I'm just going to assume that you know that. I'm not going to go through the whole spiel about that, because you probably already know that. If you don't, that's going to be another program. We can refer you to some of those other great programs and some of that information. Also going to assume that you know that native plants are generally adapted to survive in this native range with little need for human intervention. So I'm going to assume that. I'm going to speak a little bit more about that later, but I assume that you don't need that pounded into your head. So what are native plants? Well, there's a government definition for it, of course. You can read that there. Generally, the native plants, they were here before we were, for at least 100 years. I'm saying at least 100 years because we weren't there to know for sure how long, could have been 1,000 years, could have been 5 years. We're not entirely sure. Scientists probably know, but generally I'm just going to say about 100, at least 100 years. That's safe. And the plants that survive in an area grew well because of certain aspects of the environment there: the soil, the moisture, climate conditions. So geographically, what's native? Native to North America, native to the Midwest, Iowa, a particular ecosystem that I think we might cover later. The Les Hills, we're located in Les Hills. It's a little bit more unique portion of Iowa. So you say, it's native to Iowa. What part of Iowa? Central Iowa, where the glaciers have dug out these potholes, or to the Les Hills, where we have kind of pretty different soil structure and some different weather patterns. And there's a resource, the Biota Map of North America, and I'll try to make a note to remember to send that in the link resources, that can scale down to the county level. Of course, that's only as good as the data that it receives from various resources or sources, but we can sort of drill down to that level. So when we're talking about native plants, we should always say native to a specific geographic location instead of just native plants, except that I'm always just saying native plants. So that's what native plants are, but human impact on the surface, humans come in and we want to change everything. So we till up the soil and we plant brome grass so that the cattle will have something to eat. We turn up the soil so we can build houses to live in. And we decide that we don't want a hill there, so we're going to scoop out that hill and put the dirt here. So even in your own yard, you may have different soils in different areas of your yard. And also along with that, it changes the hydrology, if you're talking on a large scale or on a small scale. So human impact has affected, the area that we're living in. And we can also talk about changing climate and weather events. So that also changes has an effect on the plants and the insects and the wildlife that will live here. And also invasive pests and disease pressure can affect what plants are going to do well, what plants aren't. And stop and take a drink here real quick. So that's what native plants are. What native plants aren't. So these are some of the basic common terms for what natives are not. Exotic, they're not from this continent. You're talking, often brought in from Africa, Asia, Eurasia, Europe, because they're pretty, they had a purpose, or sometimes by accident. They can also be referred to as non-native, alien, introduced, and all these terms have a nuance to them that we can go into later if somebody asks that question later. Plants can also be naturalized, meaning that they're not from here, but they do well here. They're not really a problem that we know of. And then you have invasive plants, and anybody who knows me knows I'm all about invasives. So we'll talk more about that later. Lawns are not native. Kentucky bluegrass does not come from Kentucky. It comes from, I believe, the Middle East somewhere. And then we also have this conversation that we could have about cultivars and nativars and hybrids. I think that we'll have that conversation later too. So when I started thinking about this presentation, I started thinking about what plants that I think were native when I was growing up, what plants are, what plants aren't. So I started asking, did some informal polling about what plants are native, what plants are not native. So here you can see a list of some of the species that folks had, that we're familiar with in our yards that are native. And you'll see some there that, maybe somebody has said, oh, there's a chemical that you can spray that will take care of that for you. Well, it's a native plant. That's, a good thing, but some native species can be aggressive. Some native species can be troublesome. And you can read that disclaimer down at the bottom too. So, what's not native? Dandelions are not native. Daylilies are not native. Trumpet vine is not native. I will speak a little bit to this because I have a personal issue with trumpet vine in my yard. People will say, "Oh, but it's native to Iowa. It's native to Iowa." According to BONAP, that resource, it's native to one county in Iowa, so it's not native to all of Iowa. And even if it was, it's not a plant that you might necessarily want to have. So you can see some of the other plants listed there that are not native that people thought were native when they were growing up. So now we're talking about invasives. Boy, do I have thoughts on invasives. That's going to be another program entirely. I put Tree of Heaven first because I have a very, very personal relationship with an opinion of Tree of Heaven. You'll see some other species there that you may be familiar with that you didn't realize were non-natives at the very least and are considered invasives. So here are a couple of invasive species. White mulberry up in the top left, garlic mustard underneath it, burning bush, Canada thistle, honeysuckle, and in the center is that tree of H. Common name is Tree of Heaven. I have other thoughts about it if you haven't been able to tell. That photo could have been taken in my alley, but it was not. It is from the Iowa DNR Invasive Species Guide. But seriously, come visit me sometime and you'll see why I have thoughts about that species. So a problem with natives and non-natives that there are a lot of lookalikes out there. There are plants that look a lot like each other, and some of them can be kind of awful plants, and some of them can be not so bad plants. Dame's rocket and soapwort look a lot like phlox, and some people have issues with phlox. sweet autumn clematis, virgin bower, woodbine. There's an invasive species of that, and it looks very, very similar to the native species. Another one, tiger lily and Michigan lily. You're probably familiar with the tiger lily because I call them ditch lilies. Like every old farmstead has them, and they're just everywhere. So lookalikes. Which of these do you think are native? Well, I'll tell you what. The ones on the outsides are native, but they sure look a heck of a lot like the non-natives. And the one in the middle is Dame's Rocket, another one I have kind of a personal relationship with it. And you can tell it's Dame's Rocket not only by the time of year that it blooms, but also because it has the 4 petals, 4 petals for Dame. And if it was phlox, it would be, 5 letters, 5 petals for phlox. So now I'm going to tell you what you want to forget to do, what you don't want to do, what you want to forget about everything that you've learned or were taught as a master gardener, if you're a master gardener. That's kind of why I'm, being a master gardener teaches you a lot, teaches you to think critically about some things that you're taught as well. And again, everything is different. Every situation is different. Everything that I'm recommending or suggesting is on a spectrum, but just always kind of dial back to think about what this would look like in nature, what happens in nature, and that will help guide some of your decisions and some of the things that you choose to do. So here's the quick list. You don't need to till, fertilize, amend, mulch, weed, water, spray, maintain. Well, sort of. Tilling. The first thing many people think when okay, I'm gonna get a good garden bed. I'm gonna start planting some natives for the pollinators, and it's gonna be great and it's gonna be awesome. So first thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna till up a bed. Well, you could be just setting yourself up for a whole lot of problems. Tilling stirs up what is called a seed bank. So all those weeds that you've had, for the last, 20, 30, 50 years in this area that have not sprouted yet, well, you're just churning them all up. So in spring or in a week, you could have a whole new mess of weeds that you never had before. Also, when you're looking at some species like probably brome and field bindweed, when you till, you're chopping up those roots. Every one of those roots can sprout a new plant, and that's like the exact opposite of what you want to do. So take it with a grain of salt. I mean, if there's a way, if you just think that you have to till, there are methods that you should consider, and don't plan on tilling and then planting. Plan on tilling, putting some cardboard down, spraying, tilling. It's going to be quite a process if you choose to till. So it's, take the easy way out and just don't till. So fertilizing or amending the soil, you really, really don't need to do it. We're talking about putting the right plant in the right place, and you want to work with the soil you have there. Otherwise, you're going to be constantly trying to baby this plant and make it do what it wants to do in a place it doesn't really want to be. So fertilizing, from everything that I've ever heard with native plants, just don't do it. Just avoid it. Nope. Amending the soil, probably not, unless you have really clay soil. You might want to consider doing that if you have a patch of sandy soil. If in my yard I have an area that is just dust. It's not less dust. I don't know what kind of just dust it is, but it's right next to one section of the house, and so I needed to put some humus soil in there so that something could maybe grow there. We'll see yet if it actually happens. So fertilizing, no. Amending, probably not, but again, depends on your situation, depends what you're after, but the default should be just let it go. Mulching. This is going to be another kind of a sensitive topic, because everything that we've ever been taught is, you plant something, mulch it. You put a whole bunch of mulch around it because why? Because it looks nice. Because are you trying to hold soil, or hold moisture in the soil? Well, too much mulch and the moisture is not even going to get down there, or it's going to keep it too wet for the plant that you have there. Um, are you trying to keep weeds down? Uh, we'll talk about weeds in a minute. And then there are issues with wood mulch. So if you think about, when you're walking in the prairie or walking in the woods, even, and you're walking around, do you see, all these trees in the woods? Do they have mulch around them? No, no. Wood chips are not. That's not a natural. It's not a natural thing. Wood chips exist in the market because they were a byproduct of an industry, and they figured they could make some money off of it. Does it, mulch in moderation? Does it serve a purpose? Yes. But you may want to reconsider whether or not you're going to use wood mulch, or if you want to use leaf mulch or something else entirely. You may decide that you don't even want to mulch, because a lot of plants want to have a dry cycle. They want to be drier than mulch will let them be. And
fit to the page, so I cut it off.
Oh.
So the other thing that you can do, and we'll talk about weeds a little bit here too, is using a green mulch, and that means it's a living being. Plants like sedges, like a Pennsylvania sedge, are often recommended as a green mulch. So you're filling the spaces in between these kind of feature plants that you want to have with another living material, and that kind of takes care of some of the problem. The other thing, everything I'm going to talk about is it's all kind of like circular, so I can't talk about like one thing without bringing something else into it. So there's no surprises in this presentation, but when you're talking about maintenance, you're not going to go in and you're not going to just clear out your garden at the end of every season. So some of that material is going to fall, and it's going to kind of create its own mulch. And within that mulch, living creatures are going to spend the winter, as well as keeping some of the weeds down. So talk about weeding again. So what's a weed? We talked about, invasives and non-native species, and, it helps to know if it's, a weed is a plant out of place, who's deciding if it's a weed, because some native plants are called weeds, and you might want to have that weed in your plant. Is it going to serve a purpose? It could be, like I said, a green mulch. So what I've learned to do is to only pull the weeds that I know are going to become a problem, that I know are going to take over if I let them go. And especially this year, I've left a lot more of the weeds in place, because it's been a really, really rough year for plants, but also for the rabbits. And I've noticed that if there are other plants there that a rabbit will eat, they're not going to eat the plant that I don't want them to eat. It's worked out okay. So some days I'll go out there and I'll see that they ripped all the cages out and ate the plants I wanted to keep anyway. But that's okay, because those plants generally will come back, and they have come back, but they're all trimmed to the height of the cage that they're in. So watering, again, this year that's been kind of a hot topic, is do you water, do you not water? Well, new plants, you should probably, give them some water the first year they're in, but you want to do it as frequently as you can. You want to do it very deeply, because you want the moisture to go down into the soil, and you want those baby baby roots to go seeking out that moisture. You don't want them all hanging out on the surface because, well, I know, you know, in a few days there's going to be more water coming along, so I'm just going to hang up here and I'm not going to go try to find it anywhere else. And so you're just kind of asking for trouble if you don't water deep and let the top surface dry out. Again, right plant, right place. If you have an area of your yard where it's really, really dry and it's 4 feet beyond where your where your hose can go, you're going to want to look for species that are going to do well in that drier space. Spraying. Oh, okay. So here's another hot topic. So pesticides, I think we can all agree. Pesticides, no. Just don't do anything with pesticides. They're non-selective. They're going to kill the good as well as the bad. And you know, Japanese beetles, yeah, they kind of, you know, they're not cool, but you know, we can manage them. When we're talking about herbicides, generally, again, this is a very hot topic, and I don't really want to, you know, make too many recommendations, but they are helpful when the right chemical is used in the right concentration for the right purpose. So going back to when you're preparing a space, if you have a nice, you know, for up until yesterday, you were like a lawn person. You're like, I want to have a nice green lawn, and you decide, well, I'm not gonna, you know, I'm gonna convert this over to native plants. Probably don't need to use a herbicide. You could probably get rid of that sod in some other way. Or you can be like, well, of course I'll use me as an example, but you'll see this patch and it's just filled with garbage, just invasive species. And you've tried to manage it in the past through pulling and digging, and it just doesn't work for some species. Bindweed is terrible. You're never going to pull out bindweed. You're never going to, you know, pull out Creeping Charlie. And I'm glad I'm blanking on any more examples because I could really, boy, invasives. Anyway, so used properly for the right purpose, they're okay. You know, they can help you accomplish what you need to accomplish. It's better to use you know, a herbicide properly if you're putting, you know, native plants in its place. You know, you're creating habitat, you're creating, you know, good, you know, helping the water cycle and helping pollinators and blah 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 blah. And so you had to use herbicides once. That's okay. It really is. So maintenance. A lot of people say, you know, native plants, you know, you got to go with native plants because there's no maintenance. You never have to do anything. You just plant them and forget them. Well, you could do that. Your neighbors might have an issue. The city might have an issue. You might regret that. Are they low maintenance? You could argue that they're lower maintenance than like a vegetable garden, certainly. It's a different kind of maintenance. And it's a fun maintenance. You want to go out into your garden, you know, at least once a week and see what's blooming, what's getting ready to go to seed, what bees are buzzing on it, and trying to identify any of the, you know, dozen wasp species from, you know, teeny tiny to big, and my God, that's the biggest bumblebee I've ever seen. You know, what is that? So it's more fun. When you're talking about, you know, actual like drudgery maintenance again, you don't really want to do too much fall cleanup. You don't want to clear out your garden. If you have to do some trimming because you have to do something, be sure to leave stems of any hollow species plants. Leave them at least a foot or two because critters will live in those stems sometime in the next, you know, six or 8 months. And if you can leave them and do that in spring, you know, when you're really anxious to get out there and start doing something, that's something that you could do in spring too, is kind of, you know, take care of some of that. Again, with maintenance in the fall, you might want to harvest seeds to share the joy with others. You might want to harvest seeds in order to keep some species in control. I have a kind of a problem with my New England aster wants to live everywhere, and my neighbor wouldn't be too happy if I let it do that. So I'll go in and try to wrangle in some of the seeds, but generally you're not going to have to do a whole lot. At some point, you do kind of want to mimic fire, and clear out some material. But I find that you're going to do that anyway because you're going to be compelled to try to do something because people are helpers. We want to go out and do something and make change in our world. But you just need to step back and remember, what is nature saying, should happen here? Is this something that I need to do? Is it something that I just need to allow to happen? So that was I don't know if you noticed any of those subliminal messages that I had in there. So this is getting to my last slide. So, I've told you, some things that I've wanted to tell you, and I've forgotten to tell you a lot of things that I wanted to tell you, but, you want some more information, join Wild Ones. If you live in the Sioux City area within a couple hours of here, choose the Les Hills chapter, join our Facebook group, or look for a Facebook group near you, and I'll send some links to some of these, to some of my favorites. We have programs on YouTube from other speakers who really do know what they're talking about and can tell you, specific plants and what's great about them and how to pronounce their Latin names. And those are on our YouTube channel. And then there's another resource that I started for the spring native plant sale. I'm trying to kind of develop as kind of a local guide to help choose plants that will do well in your yard. And if you have any other questions, you can email us. And now I think it's going to be time for questions. Yeah. So I'm going to.
All right. So I will unmute everybody here, or ask everybody to unmute if you have any questions. I can read off the first one that we had in the chat before we even started. Was from Lisa. She's like, planting seeds, would you do it in the fall or spring, and how?
So I'll answer what I want to say, and then if anybody else wants to chime in, please do. Go ahead and unmute yourself and chime in. But again, mimicking nature. So, so the seed matures in August, and it's going to, what's it going to do? It's going to drop on the ground and, do its thing. It's going to hang out and hopefully, grow in the spring. So generally fall is better. Spring, if you do all the stratification stuff that you need to do, some plants want to have their seeds, in a cold, wet environment for 30 days or 90 days, and some need to, to be nibbled on, basically, or scarified. So if you could wait until spring, I wouldn't do that. And I think everybody here would agree that you want to get them out in the fall, winter, often before, if you're just going to seed an area, like right before a snow is a good time, or right after a snow, and then you can see where you've thrown your seed.
Very cool. We'll give it a sec in case anybody else wants to chime in. I can read one of the comments somebody added here. Ruth said, leaves of 4, pull some more. Leaves of 5, let it thrive. And then she also said, Dame's Rocket.
Yes.
So, and then Joanne had a question. Are there any shrubs that are considered native?
Oh, shrubs. Oh, yes. I believe that lead plant and New Jersey tea are considered shrubs, although they do, I think they're considered shrubs because they're maybe woodier in texture, but I believe that they do die back to the ground every winter. So I'm not entirely sure why they're called shrubs. We have some other people on the Zoom who would know that answer. When you're talking about like larger, shrubs, bushes, trees, there are quite a few. Serviceberry, hazelnut, 9-bark might be a little more suckery than you're looking for. But oh yeah, there are definitely shrubs And we definitely need to have some of those species in your yards to kind of ideally replace or be planted alongside your, your grandma's old lilac, and ideally you'll remove the invasive species first, but it's better to get natives in there too. I say that because I have honeysuckle I need to get rid of, and I go out there and I whack at it a little bit, and it's just like I'm going to do something else now.
And then Lisa had a follow-up question to her seeds question earlier. Should she just throw the seeds out, or should she like cover?
They needs to have good soil contact for it to like get the message. But if you cover it too deeply, and too deeply could be even a quarter or half an inch depending on the species, it could just hang out for a couple of years until it gets worked back up to the surface. So I mentioned the seed bank before. Those are all the seeds that they're just hanging out because the time isn't right. They're not like at the right place in the soil to germinate yet. So you could just be adding a really great seed bank if you cover them too deeply.
Anybody? That's it so far in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Jan says, do what mother does.
That's right.
There we go. Anybody else feel free? Oh, Ron has a question. Is early, and then in parentheses, very early spring burn off of native areas like 20 foot by 20 foot recommended, or should it be avoided? I usually do it with clear grasses.
Dottie and Diane could probably answer this the best. So if either of them can pop on, I'd love to hear their feedback on it. It depends on the purpose of your burn, I think, to a degree. It looks like Dottie is unmuted. Dottie, do you want to answer that?
Yeah. What time of year are you requesting to burn?
Spring. I think he said early, very early spring, like March.
So if you have brome grass and you want to get rid of it or actually just set it back, then you would burn early spring. Otherwise, you can burn summer, you can burn fall, anytime, but especially brome in the early spring. Most of our burns are over 20 acres. So I don't know what you're talking about, just a little area. What did you say?
Yeah, like 20 by 20 feet.
If I read it right, 20 by 20 feet.
20 feet. So you probably don't have any brome in there. So you can burn it anytime you want. Just make sure that everything around it is protected or mowed, and have somebody there with you, have water available in case it gets away.
Thanks, Dottie.
Did that answer your question, Ryan?
I think there's also another consideration though too. Just like you don't want to clean out a garden area too early in the spring before the insects have had a chance to do stuff. So you could be burning up a lot of insects and pollinators and stuff if you're burning too early.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Diane and Dottie know this, with the prairie, you only want to do maybe, a third or a quarter of it.
Yes. I was thinking that, just part of it. Yes.
Yeah. So a smaller area.
Every year.
And brome can be impacted by all the way up to maybe the end of May. So that would give insects a chance. It'd still be spring.
You can burn in June as well and impact brome. We have done that. It's all going to depend upon the day, the wind, the moisture. But you know, you and I are talking large areas, Diane. He's talking 20 feet by 20 feet.
And the brome would be more mature by then, and it would hurt the brome more by burning a little bit later when it has more of its committed to its vegetation, you know, and stuff. So it could impact it more.
And for people who maybe don't know, brome, you know, is an awful grass that has that was introduced and it's taken over, you know, our entire soil surface, it seems like.
It looks like you all answered Ron's question. He said thank you. And then Lisa had a question of best way to keep seeds.
Cool. So Diane, do you want to answer that one too?
No. Well, just some cool.
Yes, cool and dry. And keep them cool, you know, cool and dry. You don't want to keep them, you know, in the trunk of your, you know, of your car, you know, throughout, you know, for the next 2 years and hope they grow. But cool and dry. And then again, pay attention to the stratification needs. You know, if it needs to be, you know, moist for 30 days or 60 days before it'll germinate, you'll want to keep that in mind when you're getting ready to plant. Otherwise, it'll be like me, and it'll be like February or March, and you're like, oh, well, I should have thought about this in November, in regard to some species.
Anybody else have a question that you want to ask directly? Anybody wants to put in the chat?
I will answer Lisa's question a little bit better. So probably in a paper bag, when you know that they're really good and dry, then you can put maybe that paper bag or that envelope into a Ziploc to keep it dry. You can even use you know, those desiccant packets to help keep them free of moisture.
Nice. And Jenny just had a comment saying, thank you, Carrie. And so did Lisa.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Lisa.
Carrie, like all the milkweed pods, would it be better to keep those and put them out in the winter where you want them? Or should you put them down immediately like they would fall, like right off the plant?
It depends. You know, I'm going to go back to that thing. Everything, it depends. It's on a spectrum. Personally, I would put a rubber band around every milkweed pod so that it doesn't go kerfloof all over the neighborhood. And then I can go back and collect it when it's mature, and then strip the seed from the fluff. You can find, you know, some illustrations or YouTube videos on how to do that so that you can get milkweed without the fluff, and that gives you better control over where the milkweed seed's going to go. But generally, again, I would mimic nature. I mean, you're going to lose some seed to birds and some insects who are going to want to eat those seeds if you let them go out. You know, shouldn't be too many that, well, this was such a weird year. And this is such a weird year too, that who knows if the seeds that have been produced are gonna, you know, are even gonna be viable. We just don't know. But you can put them out now, or you can wait until it gets colder and you have a better shot at, you know, at working them, at them being worked into the ground through the snow and through the freeze thaw cycle.
Yeah.
Then Ruth added a comment here. She doesn't get any benefits from advertising this, but the Iowa State Forest Nursery / Iowa State University has many shrubs and trees in very cheap bundles of like 20 to 25, like $1 to $2 bare root. And then sales start September 1st for the fall. So. And
yeah, and you know, if you're like me and it's like, well, I can't put 25 of anything in my yard. You can, if there's something that you want, we can try to kind of coordinate within the Les Hills members and friends, or with master gardeners, and we can kind of like go in on a bundle, and get a bundle of hazelnut, and everybody can get 5, and then there's 5 people that have hazelnuts now. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, let us know in the feedback form that we're gonna send out.
And then Jeannie also shared a list of several native shrubs and why you'd plant them. Thanks, Jeannie. Thanks. So if anybody wants to take a look in the chat, she lists like the mature height, when it blooms, if it blooms, why it, why you might want to, and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah. So I didn't get too deep into any one thing. I hope that I
Carrie, I have one more question.
Yeah.
Nettles. So they seem to grow a lot. Are they invasive?
They're native. Stinging nettles are native.
I know, but would they be a native invasive? Because they seem to like take over.
Yeah, they seem to take over. But they are, like, get back to my list here. I know you can't see it, but there's exotic, non-native, alien, introduced, naturalized, invasive, aggressive, and troublesome. Would be probably the most accurate terms for that. So they are native. They're not invasive, but they are aggressive.
Do you think, is it better to have more of a variety on your property, like on my creek bank, than just letting the nettles away?
I would let somebody else answer that, because there's a lot of stinging nettles at my parents' place too, and it's not a top priority for me because they're kind of a pain, literally. Yeah. So I would let somebody else answer that. Diversity is always best. If there's, we can do some research. We can do some research and see what another aggressive native might be that could hold its own with it. I wouldn't know what that would be off the top of my head.
That would be an interesting topic too, to find out how it was 200 years ago. Were there big patches of nettles and then something else grew somewhere else, or was it more of a mix? It kind of brings up an interesting topic, but thank you for answering.
It sounds like Ruth is volunteering to come clear out your nettles for you.
Yeah. Questions, comments, going once, going twice, 3 times. All right. Thanks, Carrie, for rounding out our summer series of Green Thumb programs. It was a really great partnership with Iowa State Extension and Master Gardeners, Les Hills Wild Ones, that we were able to offer this series of 5 online Zoom programs this summer. Unfortunately, we had to do it over Zoom, but I think we also got a lot out of it and got to share knowledge, and hopefully in the future we'll get to do a little bit more hands-on out in nature and out in some gardens. So I really appreciate you finishing off our summer series for us.
Well, great. Well, I'm glad that I was a part of it. It was a great series for its first year out, and I think the next one is going to be pretty awesome.
Yeah, and like Carrie mentioned, we'll send out all the links and information that she has. I'll send it from our LibCal account, so it'll come from that like library alerts email. So be on the lookout for all of that. I'll send it out shortly here. So, all right, everybody, have a great rest of your afternoon and have a good weekend.